inviting me to interact across India with business people, politicians, and journalists, but also young students. So I thought it was a very good opportunity to interact with you. I'll try to tell you a little bit about how it is to be a diplomat. Do you have to be diplomatic in your style, or do you have to be less diplomatic in your style? And what does it take to become a diplomat? Can everybody become an ambassador? Yes or no? So I tried to take you a little bit through that, and please feel free to ask questions, or if you want to ask a question, I think there is also a kind of raise hand or something like that there. So let's see how it works. But first and foremost, I was born in 1957, which is long ago, and I'm standing perhaps in the late afternoon of my professional life, whereas you are standing in the very early morning and trying to become the future of your country, which is, I think, something that's extremely important. When I was born, I was in fact born on a farm in Denmark. I have an identical twin brother. So he and we went to school and college together, and nobody could distinguish between the two of us. So we were only called the Swans. The Swan is our after-name, our family name. So when we graduated, we decided to go in two directions, but we could not really agree to what kind of topic we should study. So in fact, we flipped the coin. So it came out that I had to study history and my brother had to study law. And then we joined our studies and all that. After 2 months, we were looking into each eyes and said, okay, is that really what we want? But then given our background, we were told that when you have said A, you also have to follow B. So I stayed and finished my history studies, and my brother finished his law studies. He ended up in the Ministry of Justice, and I ended up in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And over the years, we in fact started working together. So he was dealing with a lot of legal issues, and I was dealing with a lot of political, economic issues in the Foreign Ministry. And we were sitting in the same government committees or dealing with a lot of different questions. And even though we were family related, we had many fights because we represented different institutions and people thought that we didn't like each other. But in order to prepare for our meetings, we always tried to figure out a compromise before entering into the meeting. So we could easily sit and argue and so forth. Was it my intention to become an ambassador? Not necessarily. I wanted to become a researcher in history and all that, but then suddenly I was roped into the Foreign Service and became a full-fledged diplomat. And I started out dealing with what we called our DANIDA, which was development assistance. So I had to join in for a lot of meetings with the World Bank, the regional the development banks, the African one, the Asian one, and so forth. And it was quite interesting. And then suddenly I was roped in for European affairs, and that became kind of destiny for me. So I also went to Brussels and Paris, and I dealt with a lot of issues as to treaty negotiations. Even though I was not a lawyer or had a legal background, I was dealing with all these issues, representing Denmark in various discussions and meetings where we were discussing the economic and monetary union and all that kind of stuff. And then I ended up in a number of departments, being a head of department, joint secretary, and so forth. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, a request came from the Danish business world. They wanted the Foreign Service to take up a much more important role in what we today would call economic diplomacy. So in that context, I was seconded to our, at that time, biggest company, a shipping company called Maersk. So I worked there for 3 years, sitting on the boards. I was a kind of general manager, and I was doing all kinds of stuff that I had never ever dreamed of. I was buying companies, I was selling companies, I dealt with authorities across the world, whether in China or in Thailand or wherever it was, on behalf of this company. I even also had very, very hardcore legal issues to deal with. We had a case where the company, when the group had bought a company in France, and there were some due diligence issues, so I was part of that and dealt with all these issues. And then I had promised to come back to the Foreign Service to start what we would call the Trade Council of the Foreign Service. And the Trade Council is a hardcore commercial unit which has really turned Danish diplomats and their ambassadors like me into kind of business people. So every time we are really working either at headquarters or outside in different postings, we have to focus on what we call commercial or economic diplomacy. So to give you a kind of idea what that means, or every time we are advising a Danish company, for instance, investing in Denmark and things like that, we have to charge them. So we'll invoice them, and then we will see how we can help them and assist them. So basically, I'm a businessman with a diplomatic passport. So I'm trying to lobby on their behalf. So that's one part of it. And another part is, of course, how to develop your own kind of style being a diplomat. Denmark is a small country. We are only 6 million inhabitants. It's a drop of Delhi, and in an Indian context, with your 1.4 billion inhabitants, we are hardly anything. But we have been a bigger country. We lost a lot of land. In fact, we lost 1/3 of our territory a couple of centuries ago. And then we became what we would say, we tried to focus on our inner strengths. What we have lost to the outside, we had gained, and we had to gain from inside. We became traders, and today we normally will say that Danes and Danish companies and Danish diplomats, we are born globals and we are born creative. As you probably will know that Lego, the brick company that they have, they come from Denmark, and it has a lot to do with Denmark because we are very creative. We think we are born creative, and that calls for team building, it calls for kind of hands-on, and it calls for interaction. And these things are so important being a diplomat. And if you cannot really work with these kind of values and strengths, then it's extremely difficult to be a diplomat, especially if you are working with coming or representing a smaller country. I have always put a lot of efforts, and I think that's my core competency. That is really to build up networks. I'm very extrovert, and you have really, you can't attend anything if you're not willing or ready to take the floor. So from the first day, I decided that to be a diplomat, you have to stand up, you have to ask questions, you have to interact. And literally, I don't like people who are attending meetings without asking questions. I don't like this one way. It has to be two-way. And therefore, I've also developed over the years what I call my own brand. My first name is Freddy, so I've developed a brand, Freddy is Ready. So it's a catching line, a one-liner which can be used whenever you meet politicians, ministers, or business people, or professors, or students, and so forth, because you will connect instantly. So Freddy is ready for business, for compromises, for whatever kind of thing. And when I pull out my business card, I always will say, this is a ticket to growth. A ticket to growth in the sense that Denmark has a lot to offer. Even though, despite the fact that we are only 6 million inhabitants, we are punching very well beyond our kind of natural weight. We are one of the biggest dairy producing countries. We are, when it comes to green, sustainable technologies, we are one of the bigger and biggest players worldwide, and so forth. I'll come back to that. I have served in Brussels, I've served in Paris, I've served twice as an ambassador to Japan, I've served twice as an ambassador to India now, and perhaps headquarters doesn't want me back, so that's fine with me. I like to be out here. It's very, very important to connect with the culture. I don't speak Hindi, but I understand quite a lot of Hindi in the sense that I can catch the words if Prime Minister Modi is speaking in Hindi or somebody else. But I will never reveal to what level I'm understanding Hindi or how much I will be able to gather from a Hindi speech or a Hindi conversation. It's kind of the weapons that you have when you're a diplomat. Never reveal what you are able to understand, how you understand things, and so forth. And that's a very good weapon in these days, and especially also in the virtual situation. I have always been extremely focused on what I call the economic and commercial diplomacy. We are measured as Danish ambassadors. We are measured on what I would call our contribution from the country in which we serve, and in this particular case, from India. I'm being measured on to what extent I can bring the best, most optimal contribution from India to creating growth, jobs, and innovation in Denmark. So therefore, I need to be out. I can't sit in my office and just read reports. I have to be out and building up networks, contacts, and so forth. So that's part of the way which I'm working, and I don't think it's the US ambassador necessarily will do the same, or the Russian ambassador, because they have a huge apparatus and they represent something else compared with what a small country is doing. So the basic philosophy of what I'm doing and being a diplomat is that every time a decision maker, whether it's a politician, a minister, or a businessman, when they're going to make decisions, they should have a kind of in their brain a small pop-up window, like when you scroll down in the IT systems, a small pop-up window. So when they're looking for answers or a source of inspiration, Denmark should always appear. So when it comes to farming or renewables or political decisions, whatever kind, then have to keep in mind that Denmark is something to look for and look into and look further beyond. So that's how it works. I have been in India from 2010 to 15, and now I'll tell you a little bit about the story I had out here, and then why I came back. When I came out as an ambassador to India first time in August 2010, I had never been to India. I had never been to India. So when me and my family, and at that time it was only my youngest daughter, I have 4 kids, so I'm a rich man, and she went to the American Embassy School and was very happy. And she calls herself an Indian nowadays. Now she's back in Denmark, of course. But when we came to the Indira Gandhi International Airport in Delhi in August 2010, brand new, huge international airport, we thought that, oh, this is a fantastic country. And then we came out and saw what I call the Indian reality: cows, dogs, or two-wheelers, cars everywhere, potholes in the roads, and so forth. Came in and came through a very lavish area where the Danish ambassador's residence is. That's in close to the Lodi Garden, so Lichen's kind of area. And then we started working, and I went to traditionally a new ambassador will go and pay what we call courtesy calls to your closest colleagues. So after 5 or 6 visits to European ambassadors, I gave up because they were so unhappy and said, why on earth I ended up in India? What I must have done something really bad to my government or my foreign minister. So I gave up and said, okay, if that's your attitude, then I have no interest in meeting up with all of you. So I said, you have to look beyond whatever you see when you come to a country like India. You have to see the perspective. Whatever happens as to potholes, two-wheelers, cows, dogs, whatever, that's one part, but you have to look into the potential. So that's what I did. So I started really working hard and building up ties with politicians, ministers, and so forth. And then suddenly I was hit by a case, perhaps you heard about a case called Kim Davey. And that put me literally in the doghouse for almost 3 years. Nobody was allowed to meet me. I could not meet politicians. I was often kind of called to the Ministry of External Affairs to be scolded and criticized, not personally, but being the representative of the country. So I decided that, okay, should I spend my years being scolded and criticized and taking all the slaps every day, or should I try to define a different strategy? So then I decided to move out of Delhi, trying to visit the States. And for whatever strange reason, I ended up in Gujarat. And there was a Danish company who wanted me to inaugurate a new factory in Dahej. And that was in early May 2011. And I asked them, said, okay, you have invited me, but have you invited other celebrities? And said, oh yeah, we have invited the chief minister. I said, okay, I'd like to meet the chief minister. And said, oh, this is not my role, our responsibility. I said, no, but it's my requirement. So in fact, I met the then chief minister for almost 45 minutes, one-to-one at that time. And at that time, he was not well liked by Europe or the US. He was in fact blacklisted, and you know the reason why and all that. But I said, okay, we'd like to interact with you, or you're not behind bars, you have not been indicted and all that. So democratically, you are elected, so we'd like to work with you. And I also had a very, very strong ties with the Congress, and very good friends with the Congress party. So please mute your microphone. And then I built up a relationship with then chief minister. And when I came back to Delhi, of course, I had taken permission from my headquarters. But when I came back to Delhi, my European colleagues were almost axing me, and they said that you are stupid. There was a very, perhaps a largest democracy called, their ambassador called me and said, you're crazy, don't interact with this guy, and so forth. Said, we are doing it because of this and that. So in fact, I became the first European ambassador to interact frequently with then Chief Minister Modi. So today I have a very special standing, and that's one of the reasons I came back. But it shows that if there are opportunities, you should go for these opportunities. If I had decided not to go there, I had no view, I had no kind of insights as to our then chief minister, what happened and why it happened and so forth. I was just looking into, would it give any kind of meaning for me to meet with the chief minister and to interact with this guy. And that happened, and you know, I'm sure I was not the most popular ambassador in town. I know I wasn't, and people were trying all kinds of tricks, or calling in journalists, trying to say, this guy, does he really have a mandate from back home, and blah, blah, blah. But I kept this relationship, and I was invited for Vibrant Gujarat. You have heard that a number of times, and I gave a speech, and I was very much out in the public, which is very, very important. Being an ambassador is just also being very profiled and out in the public, and never shy away from giving interviews, stating your views and so forth. Often you had to present these views as your personal perception, personal views, but behind that you have kind of weight from other countries, of course, or from your own country. So that's one of these things. And when I still remember, and I will never forget that, during the elections, general elections in 2014, a lot of people in Delhi said, oh, this guy will never ever become a prime minister. I said, listen, I'm pretty sure that he will become a prime minister. And he became a prime minister. And then I was sitting on the 15th of August on the ramparts of the old fort in Delhi, listening to the address. And for the first time, the elected prime minister was giving a speech. And normally, I had attended that over the years, and normally the prime minister will tell about all the achievements, how many power plants, how many kilometers of expressways have been laid out and things like that. But this prime minister suddenly started addressing sanitation, Swachh Bharat and all that. And people were literally shocked because here you had a prime minister who was talking about something very ordinary and perhaps we don't want to hear about. But there, I think you got a different take on India. You don't have to agree with it and so forth, but I took notice of it and found people really literally shocked that this prime minister was talking about ordinary things, and they were perhaps really, really shocked that they had expected something different. So then I left in 15, but I maintained a very good relationship with the prime minister. And then after 4 years in Japan, I was asked to come back to India, and I decided to come back to India. But before I left India in 2015, I gave an interview to Doordarshan. They asked about my views about India and so forth, and said, first time I came to India, I've never been there. So for me, India was a country. After a couple of years witnessing the Republic Day parade about unity and diversity, India surfaced as a nation. And when leaving, my conclusion was that I had left or was going to leave a living civilization, because you have cultures that have been intact for thousands of years. So the mainstream culture can, of course, be very diversified, but still it's more or less unchanged over so many years. So that was kind of farewell from my side to India. And what I did, and I hope you will do that in your future work, is that you keep up the contacts. I've never given up my contacts in India. I'm also maintaining my contacts in France, in Brussels, and also maintaining my contacts in India. So, I mean, today you have the mobile phones, you have everything, mails and so forth. So never ever forget to keep your network intact, and don't think about the past as something, no, it's over and we are only in the present and we are heading towards the future. Keep your network intact. That's very, 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 very important. So when I came back to India in 2019, almost a year ago, within 1 week, I have met all the most important people here in India. I have been interacting with journalists, I've been interacting with ministers and politicians, bureaucrats, and so forth. And to be a diplomat today calls for an active network. And India is so big that India has several networks. The network in Delhi is not going to help you that much in Mumbai or in Bengaluru or in Chennai or wherever it is. But you need to really build up these networks, and that's the only way in which you can work as a diplomat. So you also have to be very, very profiled and out in the open air. So I give a lot of lectures and I'm never saying no. So that's perhaps the reason why I said yes to you. I'll never say no, except if time is short and I have something else to do. What is the driving force for a diplomat, and should be the driving force for each of you and all the youngsters of this world? And I will make a small drawing for you. Can you see this? This is a question mark. So what is really basic for all of us is that we have to be curious. We have to ask questions. Why this? Why not that? And so forth. And if you ask questions, you get insights. And if you mirror the question mark, then you get a heart, meaning that you get insights. And if you get insights, you get kind of happiness. And that kind of happiness will give you a platform that will allow you to interact with tons of people across the world. And you need to develop these kind of things. You can find it on YouTube. This kind of question mark, because I developed that when I was giving a speech or lecture in Japan at a high school. And suddenly I realized that in Denmark we are taught to ask questions. We don't accept the authorities, we don't accept the schoolmaster. We are forced to ask questions because kind of critical approach is so important. But when you ask questions, you will get insights, and that will create happiness. So I think that hopefully also will inspire all of you. The world is changing a lot, and I think I'll spend a little time on how I see the new world order. I have always been of the very, very strong opinion that India has perhaps the biggest potential of any country in the world. You not only you have the scale, you're almost 1.4 billion people. You also have a lot of technology. The digital India is second to none. There's hardly any company in the world of a certain size who does not have any collaboration with an Indian IT company. All our Danish companies, all the back office functions, and also even higher up in the value chain are done through Indian companies, through Indian IT engineers and so forth. And in that context, you have a lot to offer. So you have the technology, you have the human resources, and you have what is, I think, much more important in this world that is changing constantly. You have a hunger. You are so, based on this kind of question mark, you have kind of inner hunger. You want to do better than your parents. Your parents want you, they were like you to do even better and so forth. In my country, in Denmark, in Europe, I don't see this kind of hunger existing any longer. We are too welfare-based, and it's only based on your personality if you want to move ahead. But here, you want to move ahead, you want to do something, you want to leave behind a footprint and so forth. And that's one of the biggest assets that India has. And I think given, of course, the Corona and COVID-19 situation, that India more than ever stands up for the best potential opportunities that any country in the world will have. But it takes a lot of efforts. For many years, India has always been claiming that we are the prime destination for foreign direct investments, and we are X, Y set of things. Words, words, but no actions. So this time, Danish companies from across the world who would like to invest in India, they are no longer buying words, they are looking for actions. They want to know how to do business in India. They want to know predictability, and they want to know stability and so forth. And if you can deliver on that, I'm pretty sure you can, then India will have the best opportunities ever in your modern Indian time. And I hope that the government will deliver on these things. And I see a lot of positive signs in this context. India in the Western world is often seen through the lens of Western media. And these medias are not necessarily neutral. They have many, many views, and they're often, that's my personal view, but often India is seen as a poor country with masses of poor Indians, potholes, no sewage system, the caste and all that, all these issues, whereas very, very few are looking into how India really functions and the huge potential that India has. So in that context, I'm doing what I can in sitting in my chair, really to secure that people have a fair, balanced knowledge about India, what India stands for, what are the main objectives for India. It's so easy to criticize India about X, Y set of things, and the same can happen about Denmark. But given your size and your geopolitical position, then you are much more prone for a lot of criticism, because a lot of people will not understand you. They will not really look into how India is. Of course, India has the opportunities, you have the scale, but you also have the scale when it comes to the challenges. I mean, you have child mortality, you have all these issues related to the poor people and so forth. And when we have had this Corona situation, We all saw the migrant workers and in scores trying to get back to the villages and so forth. Was that representative for India? To some extent, but it's not the full story about India. And I think it's important to explain many different nuances and many other things that are working and so forth. It's not this issue about the migrant workers will always be there. And every time I'm seeing what's happening in India from the outside, you will see these photos or video clips of thousands of migrant workers trying desperately to get back to the villages and so forth. That's part of the history, but there's much more really to look into. One thing which I'm really, really keen to pursue in my diplomatic position here in my career is how India is positioning herself in the new global order. Modern India, something. Then you became a leading member in NAM, the non-aligned movement and so forth. And then you gradually build up a closer relationship with the US. And I think, but that's my personal view, that India is now moving really out of the non-aligned movement big time towards the US. And whether it's good for you or not, I will leave that to you. Personally, I think it's the right direction. The democracies will have to stand together and work together in order to secure that there's rule of law and these things that will really rule the world order and so forth. And I know that India is being sought after and eagerly being looked into as a new kind of superpower or world power, global power in the new world order. And I hope that India will be able to deliver on that. And I'm pretty sure that you will. I have never been to any nation with such huge potential as you have here. You have still a lot of hidden potentials. These have to be unleashed. And it's also my role as an ambassador, not only to be the ambassador of Denmark to India, I'm also, in fact, I myself call myself an ambassador of India to the outside world. So my role is two ways. So, of course, to get the maximum out of my presence for Danish interests out here, but the other way around to secure that India is being seen as a global player with a huge potential, and the potential given the demographics of India are second to none. So I hope that all of you will belong to the future, that you will take part. And President Kennedy had this famous saying that about what can you ask from your country or from yourself and so forth. And I think your country, your nation needs you, and you have not only to be there and asking for all kinds of goodies and freebies and all that. You have to ask yourself, how can I contribute to the future of my country? And you can only do that if you connect with people, if you ask questions, and you take up a kind of sincere attitude to your future life. So that's what is very, very important. But it will never come by its own. So you have to really work hard. You have to build up these networks. Today's world is based on networks. And luckily or unluckily, we are so dependent on virtual networks nowadays. So at some point in time, the social distancing has come too far. But this way of working is so important. So basically, to really sum up a little bit, to be a diplomat is to be very active, very extrovert, look for the opportunities, interact with people, don't shy away. Don't attend meetings if you are not asking questions or you're not interacting. Don't stand in the corner. Don't leave early or so. Just be active. Look proactively for opportunities. And you are so lucky because you represent India. And India is huge, has the scale, and has the future. So these kind of slogans about India is the owner of this century and so forth. It's true. There's hardly any country in the world where the youngsters of your generation has better chance than compared with yours. Of course, Danes have a lot of opportunities and chances, but they are not so hungry. They are not, they're only caring about themselves. You have to care about your country. You have to look into how you can exert your influence and how you can help your country grow and take up the responsibilities that a country of your size deserves and what we expect from you. So I think I will stop here, and then we can have some Q&A, and I can see there are some chats. It's okay I start by answering these different questions? Fine. So let's see. Where is, let's see. Good morning. This is Sandeep Srivastava. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, good morning. Theodore. Good morning, everyone. A warm greetings from Yara, Professor of Law. That's fantastic. Would you please let us know about challenges in diplomacy at the time of globalization and the present where we are facing pandemic? Yeah, to answer that, that's from Jyoti Khanna. The pandemic that we are facing has changed the world drastically. It has also changed the human interaction drastically. It calls for political leadership to bring a nation through that. You cannot leave it to experts, and our Denmark's example is a very good example of that. To start with, our health experts were more or less defining what kind of action should be taken. And it seemed that they were on the wrong track. So the political leadership took over and said, let's have a lockdown. Can you avoid COVID-19 cases by a lockdown? No, but you can prepare your country. You can scale up your facilities or whatever you need to cope with the number of cases. We were extremely lucky and successful in Denmark, and now we have really opened up. So it takes political leadership, and it's so important that we are utilizing that. Globalization has changed drastically because one of the consequences of globalization is that we could travel everywhere and at every time to all parts of the world. And that also led to the spread of this virus. So I'm pretty sure that this kind of pandemic, and it's not the last one, unfortunately, that will have an impact on how you're traveling and so forth. Give you an example. When Danes are coming abroad, there's a special app where you can inform your embassy or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that you are now in India. So if there is some kind of urgency, you know how to connect with people. And it turned out that many of our Danes that stranded, for instance, here had no such, they didn't sign up for this app. So it became extremely difficult for us to locate them then when we wanted to repatriate them and so forth. So perhaps in the future, you cannot leave your own country without signing up for an app, and you have your own app here and so forth. So I think that will be one of the consequences. In a more kind of global perspective, I see companies diversifying. You have read in the newspapers and many other places that many companies, since this virus started in China, that many companies who had their, say, supply chain starting from China, their global operations came to an instant standstill. And that's why I think a lot of companies are now considering other destinations, India being one of them. It will also have an impact on countries or how they position themselves and how we deal internationally with pandemics and so forth. And you know about the WHO and the criticism and all that about whether they were neutral or they were just following whatever. So I think we'll see a lot of changes, and one of the winners will definitely be India, if you know how to position yourself. So NB8 that's the Nordic Baltic countries, and we meet every Friday. So we sit physically, of course, respecting social distancing and hand sanitizing and mask and whatever and whatnot. But we are looking into all these issues, and of course, we also we are discussing the Belt and Road Initiative. The European Union has taken a very let's say, a very balanced view, saying that China is a competitor, but also a partner, given the size. Recently, we're also seeing a lot of countries becoming a little bit more skeptical about China, and this kind of attitude, which started in US and so forth. I think that will have, that's something that you have to follow in the coming years. The unlimited joy for China is no longer present, and I think the balance between a competitor and partner will change a little bit. And I'm pretty sure you'll see the same here in India. You have the Ladakh issue and some other issues. I'm pretty sure Huawei and so forth are what we call critical infrastructure. You will see perhaps the same thing as we have seen in our part of the world. Yes, it's important. Yes. How is world diplomacy affected? I think there are two things about the world diplomacy. Globalization, as we knew before COVID hit us, will never come back. And we saw in the response to COVID, every country got into itself and closed the borders, took their own decisions, imposed their own lockdowns and so forth. And it's a difficult exercise in a democracy, because you are in fact limiting, containing, controlling, restricting the democratic values and rights and so forth. But it will have a huge impact. And I think we also will see that we are moving from globalization to more regional-based structures where countries will work closer together, and you will see a diversification. For instance, we know that a lot of the drugs that we are in need of, they will, for the time being, they are manufactured in China, but India could be the pharmacy of the world. So there are also opportunities in that context. And then Mashwari, so what are the skills do we need to become different? How do we stand out and unique? You have to be open-minded. A diplomat is not just a guy or sitting and writing reports. You have to get out of your office. You have to meet ordinary people. You have to interact. You have to develop your own profile. That's the only way. And I was, in many years, part of the recruiting panel in the Foreign Service of Denmark. And the only thing I cared for was the personality of people. If you're extremely introvert, then you will have no chance whatsoever, especially if you represent a smaller country. You have to be extrovert. You have to have the ability to talk with people, to present yourself, and to interact with people. So whether you are a historian or lawyer or whatever you are, then it's not of that importance, sir. The future relation between Denmark and India, they are the best ever. On the 12th of May and the 14th of May, we had a brilliant week. 12th of May, we had the first virtual interaction that India had with any other country in full-fledged foreign policy consultations. We call it the Joint Commission between India and Denmark. We had a virtual meeting, and that is really significant in our relations. And 2 days later, on the 14th, our Prime Minister had a telephone conversation with your Prime Minister. And one of the outcomes of that was that we are working towards what we call a green strategic partnership. So virtual diplomacy, or I call it COVID diplomacy, is something that we will see developing over the years. And India is extremely good at it, extremely good at it. So we have the, I think we have the best ties that we could wish for. What is the biggest challenge you have faced since becoming an ambassador? First, when I was put in a doghouse during my first tenure in India from one day to another, I was put in a doghouse, meaning that nobody could meet me, and people whom I knew, politicians, ministers, bureaucrats, from one day to another, they were banned from greeting me, to be seen with me. So it takes a lot of mental strength to survive in that context, and that forced me out of Delhi, not there physically, but I went to Gujarat and built up a tie with your present prime minister. I think culturally, Denmark and India, we are celebrating 400 years anniversary of our ties this year. The first Danes came to India in November 1620. So we are celebrating that this year in a place in Tamil Nadu called Trangibar. And we did not come like the British as kind of trying to colonize India. We were traders, so we signed a contract, we exported, imported, and so forth. And I think that's very important. What is important, Japanese and Indian culture, I think you're much more, you have much more similarities than diversities, India and Japan. Indian culture and Indian culture, Japan and Indian culture are very similar. Individualism is not really praised. It's a community. You cannot stand out. And you see that in India, you see that in Japan. And when I was asked by Doordarshan about my view on India, and then I came up with this idea that India was a living civilization, then of course they asked me, are there any other living civilizations? I said, yes, you have Japan and China. And then they said, oh, what about Europe? And I said, no, forget about Europe. It's about to what extent you have been able to maintain uninterruptedly the main cultures of your country or your nation. And that goes for India, that goes for Japan, and that goes for China. So, and perhaps one of the reasons that Prime Minister Abe of Japan and Prime Minister Modi of India, they're good friends, perhaps it has to do with that the cultural similarities are more or less the same. So and I'm happy that I served twice in Japan and now twice in India, because that gives me a kind of deep insight. What is the scheme of scholar and funding with a PhD in Denmark here? You have to see what kind of positions coming up. It's extremely difficult to come to Denmark. Not that we don't like you, the Indians. We have many Indians living in Denmark. We have many people on starting in Denmark doing their PhDs. And if you go to our technical university outside of Copenhagen, you'll find a lot of Indian professors and teachers and PhD students. It's not impossible to come there, but you need to you have to apply, you have to come with the right kind of competences. And then the big thing is, how long can you stay in Denmark? And unfortunately, we are pretty tough in Denmark. So if you can't get a job, then it's out. And personally, I don't like that. Because I've seen so many talented Indians are being forced to leave Denmark because they couldn't find a job or whatever. And we have operated, first time I was out here, we were operating called a green card scheme. And that allowed, if people had the right competences, there was kind of a point-based system. So they could come to Denmark and try the best luck. Unfortunately, many of those ended up as selling pizzas or distributing newspapers and so forth. And that was really a loss for the person concerned, but also for our society. And it stands a little bit in contrast to the whole idea. We have always been looking for the global talents. And Denmark has a demographic profile which is very different from India. So at some point of time, we are aging and will not have sufficient hands and brains. And therefore, I think we should be a little bit more open and bring in the right people. On the other hand, you also have a lot of Indian companies working in Denmark. Larsen and Toubro, founded by two Danes, but they have their IT arm, LTI, and the other TCS and so forth. They have a lot of Indian engineers working in Denmark. So that's another way of doing it. You can also join your universities as a guest professor and so forth. What we did recently was to sign a MOU between the Copenhagen Business School and the Gujarat Maritime University. Denmark, being a shipping nation, is of course for Gujarat and the GMU very important to develop closer ties. One third of all the seafarers on Danish ships, Danish flagged vessels, are from India. So there's kind of a link here, which I think we could do even more for in the future. So don't give up, but it's not easy, and I don't think it'll be easier. But you can all ask questions by unmuting your microphone here.
Sir, I have a question, sir.
Yeah, please introduce yourself. Yes.
Good morning to you, sir. I'm Siddharth from Manipal University, Jaipur.
Welcome.
So I had a question that you have worked in government. You have worked with the Indian government in 2010. During that time, the Congress regime was there in India. And today, the BJP regime is here in India in 2020. What difference do you feel between both the regimes? Their approach towards diplomacy?
I think India has developed, India has been on a journey from what I call the non-aligned movement towards a more proactive foreign policy. Whether it has to do with Congress, contra BJP, I don't know. But I think it's important that a country or nation of the size of India is interacting geopolitically and is caretaking its own interest. No country, irrespective of size and scale, can survive in the long run without international cooperation. So whether it has something to do who is in charge of the government or not, that I will leave to others to decide. What is important is that you have able bureaucrats, but you also have a political leadership. And the days where India did not care about too much of the outside world and had enough in its kind of its own challenges and so forth, will no longer come back. So I don't hope the self-reliant attitude means that everything should be done and can only be done in India. So India for the Indians, fine with me. I have no objection to that. But an India that will not cooperate and not interact with the outside world, that's a wrong attitude. But I don't see that happening either, I must say. So, but of course, there's a huge difference between the Congress-led India and the BJP-led India. Whereas to the good or for the worse, I think it depends a little bit on where you're standing. My only take is that we want to see a strong India, an interactive India, and proactive India. That's the only way forward for this planet. Let me give you one example, which is so important. We're all talking about how we can combat the fight against the climate changes. We're also talking about the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Can these things be done without India? No. India has to be part of the equation to solve these issues. So that calls for international cooperation with India, out of India, and for India. So whether a Congress-led government or a BJP-led government is in control of India, it's up to you. I mean, it's a democracy. You can cast your ballots and all that. But we want to see a strong India who takes up her responsibility for the global affairs. And I see a much more globally proactive India these days than I saw originally when I came out. It has to do with history, it has to do with developments and so forth, but in today's world, a huge country or nation like India not interacting with the outside. That will not be the serve the interests of India. Yeah, other questions?
So one more question I had. So what do you feel that we as Indians are lacking as compared to the European countries and America, that we are not able to progress in the world? What we are lacking?
I don't think you're lacking anything. One of the biggest changes I saw from when I left India in 2015 and coming back was the degree of self-confidence. I mean, it has grown, I mean, to an extent that I thought I had come to a different planet. And I hope that this self-confidence is a driving force for you individually in whatever you're going to do, but also for the nation. That you believe in yourself and you're not just sticking your head and saying, okay, we are a poor country and we are too many and we have a lot of challenges. So we have to fight it out ourselves and we close our eyes and minds. That's a wrong attitude. And therefore, I'm extremely happy that I could see an India and Indians that have become so self-confident. And as your very able foreign minister said last year, I think Dr. Jaishankar said, we can't stand on the riverbank or on the beach and desperately trying to look to see what's on the other side of the river or the sea. We have to cross the sea. We have to cross the river. And I hope you will do that, not only as a nation, but also you individually. That's so you're not lacking anything. You have added to your abilities and competences. So I hope you will just continue the road that you have embarked upon. Yeah, next question. We'd like some ladies, because I like gender equality. There must be a number of ladies around here. Please ask a question. Hello. Don't be shy. Hello.
Sir, if they're not asking, can I ask you a question, please?
Yeah, you have a soft voice, so please go on.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I want to ask, when you said we're not lacking in anything, I think we lack in implementing the reforms we make. What's your opinion in that?
Yeah, but that's true. I think I like the political strategy of utilizing missions, the mission Swachh Bharat, Jal Shakti, Divan, and all these things, and the doubling of the farmers' income. That's a very mobilizing kind of attitude. So India can be ruled by missions, but missions and nice words are not sufficient. You need to have actions on ground. And you have a very strong structure, the IAS, Indian Administrative Service. All the IAS officers are extremely educated and so forth. But perhaps they're not that willing they're perhaps not part of this transformation that is needed. So one thing is to make a lot of missions and try to engage people and mobilize people. But if it's not really fulfilled through actions, then you have an issue. So I think India should be far better in take actions and to execute. And hopefully this time we'll see this happening to a far bigger extent.
But sir, how in your opinion we can increase that implementation?
By telling your bureaucrats that if they're not behaving well and they are not executing, then they will be kicked out. Accountability is very, very important, yeah, but it's true. And I like a system that Telangana has introduced. If a company wants to set up an investment, then there's a scheme, and within 15 days, it will be granted all the necessary licenses. If they have not been granted, within these 15 days, then they will stand as being approved. And the bureaucrat who was in charge of delivering but did not deliver would be fined and get a personal fine. That's the only way to do things, to hold people accountable, force them and tell them to move and don't sit in an office and so forth. And you have really to change this attitude. It's so important, really. So
thank you so much, sir.
That's one question about what is that? My question: the COVID era will affect the relationship of India with other countries. Yes, of course, it will affect. It will affect the COVID will affect the whole world. It will also affect the way in which countries are interacting and how they're behaving, what kind of decisions they will make. I think what we have seen is that America first is now also India first, or Denmark first. Nobody, I mean, people are really taking shelter in their own home in order to protect themselves. And that's what I have seen during this COVID situation. And it will come, and whether we will develop new ways of cooperating, I think it remains to be seen. But the past is very, very different from what it used to be. And the future will also be perhaps even more changed and drastically changed from what we expect. So the development is not just a long line linear. It's really, we don't know where we're ending, and perhaps it's the first time ever in our history where we have so much of insights and knowledge where we do not know where we are ending. So that every crisis will have a lot of opportunities, and I think if you can do it in India, you will have a bright future, and you will all be part of that. So that's one thing. Yes.
Hello, good afternoon, sir. I have a question.
Please.
My question is, what is your view in understanding law between Denmark and India, and how can the two nations work together on certain common issues that both the countries are facing? What is your view on that, sir?
Yeah, what kind of issues should we work on? So give me an example. Where should you work together?
Like any kind of common issues like employment?
I think what is important is that in Denmark we have high standards. We have very high labor standards, but we also have a tripartite collaboration. So the employers and the employees, they're more or less working independently. And then the government will only step in when it's needed. But you need to have some certain standards. And really, I don't like what I've seen somewhere where labor laws are let's say, sidelined in order to rope in investments. I think it's important to have some certain standards. Basically, we're all laborers, and we don't like to see our conditions being downgraded or sidelined and so forth. Of course, there's a balance. But where I think we can work even stronger together is what I call the green transformation. Denmark, in the early 1970s, we were suffering from the oil crisis. I was a young child at that time. All the cars stopped. There were weekends where we were not allowed to use cars, the lifts and escalators, everything stopped. Everything stopped, literally, because we were 100% dependent on oil from the Middle East. Then we developed the wind turbines, and today renewable energy, mainly wind in Denmark, plays a huge role. So I think last year, 45% of all electricity consumed in Denmark came from renewables. So basically, we have been able to double the size of our economy since the 80s, and still the consumption of energy has been stable or decreasing. It means that you can decouple economic growth from energy consumption. The footprint, CO2 footprint, has become less and less. And we think that's one option for India and it's not just about being nice and have the right political correctness in mind when talking about climate and all that environment. It's also a smart way to create permanent new jobs. And wind turbine industry today is a double-digit billion business with thousands of jobs across the world. And it all started in Denmark. So I think that's an option where, or a field where we can work even stronger together. And that's why we are opting for this Green Strategic Partnership. And it has to come. So I see a photo or a video of a young, handsome guy sitting with some scale, green scale on the backside. That's fantastic. That's a Green Strategic Partnership. But it has to be in balance, of course. Hi, yeah.
Thank you, sir.
More questions?
So Denmark has been one of...
Time is running. Sorry, please, last question then, okay, please.
So Denmark has been in the list of the happiest countries. So what are the contributing factors for this reason?
This one, if you ask questions, you get answers and you get happiness. And the second part is that the Lego bricks, it calls for teamwork, hands-on, and I tell you, if you take a bunch of Lego bricks and pour down on the ground, the kids or even adults will start building, and they will not necessarily be able to communicate because they have different languages and so forth, but creativity is so important, and that's one way. So this idea of question mark, creating happiness, that's really important, and Lego. And then of course, I know not everybody will subscribe to this viewpoint, but tax, and I know many of you will say tax is a kind of evil thing. Denmark, we have some of the highest taxes in the world. And for me, when I pay tax to Denmark, I am investing in my society. So when you pay tax, then you also want to have a return on your investment. And I have 4 kids, and we have free health care, we have free education in Denmark. So I don't like these ideas of people who are opting for tax evading or schemes or tax reducing schemes. It's a wrong attitude. We have a responsibility vis-a-vis our society. And that's why I'm a happy taxpayer. I'm really a happy taxpayer. And I think it's really, really important that we pay our taxes, because that is my investment in a better society. Is also my investment in a society where those who have less can get something. So and you know, I have never claimed reimbursement on GST out here, because I think I pay GST, and hopefully will end up in the right, not the politicians or bureaucrats' pockets, but it will add to the wealth of India, so this money can be invested in a better future for you, your families, your friends, and whatever kind of kids you might have in the future. So tax has to be paid with joy and happiness, but there must, of course, be a balance. And that's why it's important to work together as a community to secure that we have a system based on equality. So we have the same rights, we have the same obligations. That's important. Hi.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so I think more or less will soon have to jump to the next webinar. And yeah, that's good. Please, more of that. So the more you pay in tax, the better you will have a better society. So pay with tax, and you'll be happy. Okay.
So, good noon, everyone. This is Bhavya Bihani, student of School of Law, Manipal University, Jaipur. It was my honor to propose a vote of thanks on the behalf of Manipal University, Jaipur, as we conclude today's session. It was indeed a matter of immense privilege for Manipal University, Jaipur, to have Mr. Freddy Svane, sir, Honorable Ambassador of Denmark to India, for a truly engaging and highly informative session on experiences of diplomacy. What better time it could have been to know about the very essence of diplomacy and all its aspects. We extend our sincere thanks to you, sir, for giving us your valuable time out of your busy schedule. And we all would love to stay connected with you and see you again in future. I would also like to thank Dr. Vijayalakshmi Sharma ma'am, Director, School of Law, Puran Rajpurohit, Himangini Singh, Neha Maheshwari, Tanya Prasad, Sanidhya Kulshetra, and Vaibhav Kumawat for making this webinar possible. Last but not the least, I would also like to thank our informed audience without whose participation the session would have been incomplete. Thank you.
I also thank all of you, and I hope.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, and I hope at some point of time I will be able to pay a physical visit to your place and continue our interaction. But once again, thank you for allowing me. I was truly honored, and I hope that at least some of my thoughts will inspire you to pay your tax with happiness. Okay, I wish you a happy day and all the best, and never give up. Future is just around the corner, and may it be green and sustainable. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. We would love to see you again.
Yes, all the best. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.